Hello and welcome to our first video session on the introduction and general overview of Norse paganism and heathenry specifically. So what is Norse paganism? Norse paganism is the belief in the ancestral gods of ancient Scandinavia. We're referring to the gods of Asgard and Vanaheim, Odin, Thor, Freyja, and Njord. That is Norse paganism. Now, Norse paganism has, just like many other faith, spirituality, and religious paths out there, they have several subgroupings of the larger category that we're going to call Norse paganism. And we're going to talk about each of these individual types or variations in detail. And the first subcategory that we're going to talk about is Asatru. And Asatru is probably one of the more commonly known variants out there. And Asatru is a reconstructionist path. And what that means is that they follow very, very closely to the Eddas and to the sagas and to the stories and the practices of the ancient peoples of Scandinavia. It's also value-based heavily on honor, truth, integrity, individual independence, and such forth like that. But Asatru focuses as heavily as they can on historical accuracy. And they do have their own very specific sets of rituals and practices and holidays, and these practices are usually very, very structured. They're very, very regimented and very, very organized. Now, Asatru does have some ethnic regulations depending on the Asatru group that you're looking at, and what I mean by that is that generally Asatru is practiced by individuals who have some sort of genetic or ethnic tie to the peoples of Scandinavia, Norway, Sweden, Denmark being the primary ones of those. So when Asatru, there are some ethnic values in there that take place. Fornsider is the next subgroup, and Fornsider basically is also referred to as Folketru, and it's referred to as the faith of the folk. Now, much like Asatru, they do value very heavily accuracy on the sagas, the Edda tales, and such forth like that. So just like Asatru, they are a very heavy reconstructionist path. Now, folk is kind of how they also have as far as a worldview goes, and they do have stronger regional and ethnic identities like you see in Asatru, but in Fornsider it's much more pronounced. And generally, again, membership in communities of this particular variation are going to be heavily dependent on your lineage, your ancestral lineage, and then they will accept membership on only very certain areas of Scandinavia, or I do hear that they accept general Caucasians as well. So that is Fornsider. The next variant is one we really don't have to say a whole lot about, and that is Rokatru. And Rokatru is the worship and the veneration of the Jotunar, the Thursar, the giants. Largest example that everybody knows would be Loki. So Rokatru is the veneration and worship of the giants, the forces of chaos and of violence, and Loki being the biggest one that's venerated in that particular category. Now, our last subgroup of the larger subgroups, rather, it is, and that is heathenry. And I personally, myself, I identify as heathen. And what this basically means is heathenism is an encompassment of two very distinct ideals. And heathenism is also, it's very reconstructionist in that we do take a lot from the Eddas, we do take a lot from the sagas, and anything that we can pull as far as the way that things were done ancestrally, and we do try to reconstruct that here into the modern day. But where heathenry starts varying off from the other main subgroups is that heathenry is also considered to be a revivalist style of community. And what that means is that heathens try to take these ancient practices and these ancient stories and make them relevant into a modern day setting, make it relevant in today. So heathenism really it straddles both sides of the fence. And another thing about heathenism that makes it very specific against the other major subgroups, and that is heathenism and heathenry is generally very inclusive. It's very open. Heathens generally take the story of the creation of man and woman very literally, in the fact that this man and woman were the progenitors of the entire race. So to heathens, we believe that we are all children of the gods. We simply are, some of us are awakened to the light and the glory of the gods, and some yet still have yet to awaken to it. So that's going to be heathenism there as a broader term, basically. Now there are a couple of other smaller subcategories, and some of these are actually starting to grow in numbers, just from what I've seen over the course of my practice. And the first of these smaller subcategories is Norse Wicca. And basically Norse Wicca is you take all of the ideals and the fundamentals that you have in regular mainstream Wicca, and then you tailor it exclusively to the Norse pantheon, to the Norse ideal of animistic belief, and that is that everything contains a spirit, from the trees to the birds to us, everything. So Norse Wicca, it's becoming very popular, and I actually see that, you know, realistically what Norse Wicca is it's very undeveloped cedar is really what it is. So I see that as these Norse Wiccans come in and they grow in their spirituality, they're actually going to find themselves as heathens, because cedar is the magic of the Vanir, who were stalwart, you know, allies of the Aesir. The next subcategory, and this one is even less inclusive, and it's much more ethnically and geographically focused, and that is Firnsidu. Now there are two main categories of Firnsidu, and that is Theism and that is Irmanism, and all of these are regionally focused. So with Theism, it is primarily originating around the Anglo-Saxons, so it's something that you're going to find exclusively in areas of heavy ethnic Anglo-Saxon heritage. And the other one, Irmanism, is very exclusive and very specific to the core Germanic area, Germany specific. So Firnsidu, you're only going to find in those two particular parts of the world, and if you don't belong to those two areas, you're not going to be a practicer of Firnsidu. Now, the next smaller category, and this one is actually probably a moderate, medium-sized one, and that is Odinism. And Odinism is generally associated with much more radical views as far as membership go, ethnic identities, geographical heritages, and such forth like that. They also have a very folkish view when it comes to the world. So that is Odinism, and that is the subcategories of Norse paganism. So right now we're going to talk about the aspects, what it is that makes Norse paganism and heathenry what it is today. And the first of these aspects is that it is polytheistic in nature. And what this means is that we have more than one God. And anyone who's been within the faith long enough know that we actually have more gods than you can count on both hands and both feet at the same time. We have gods for just about literally anything that we could possibly need, and this was very vital to the ancients' worldview and their cosmic view as far as their place goes in the grand cosmology of things. Now, the next key aspect is that we mentioned this a little bit earlier, and that is that it is animistic in nature. And what animistic means is that the spirits inhabit the natural world. the trees, the flowers, the plants, the squirrels, the birds, the deer. Everything contains an essential spirit or essence. And this all ties us together in the grand scheme of the tapestry of the universe and the cosmos. So Norse paganism is definitely animistic in nature. We have many tales and stories of elves and dwarves and forest sprites and trolls, and we definitely believe that the entire universe is very, very alive. Now, the next key aspect is the Reconstructionists, and that the Reconstructionists aim to bring the ancient religions identically into the modern day, which means there's no evolution of time or any evolution of practice when you're looking at Reconstructionists, because they're taking the ancient ways and they're basically doing a carbon copy of that. Unlike the next key aspect, which is the Revivalists, well, what they do is they focus on taking the ancient and the ancestral ways and making them applicable, adopting them to a modern day and to a modern practice, so that we as modern creatures and modern beings can more effectively connect with the divine in the way we understand and conceive us, the world around us, and the cosmos as a whole. And the next key aspect we just said was cosmology. Our cosmology is that Yggdrasil holds up the 9 realms, and that we have 9 essential realms within all of the cosmos. Now here's where things start getting a little misinterpreted, and this also is a revivalist kind of concept, and that is that the 9 worlds do not exist in the parallel that most people today could probably conceive it to be. So what I'm basically saying is that in 1,000 years from now, hopefully when we have mastered space travel, you will not be able to book a charter flight to Nidavellir to see the dwarves at work in their smiths. They will not be able to jump a transport ship to Jotunheim on a paid safari to hunt giants. That's not the way the cosmology really works up. And then when you bring the Bifrost into the concept and the God's view of the cosmos, really what we're looking at are parallel worlds, parallel universes, parallel existences, basically. So there are only certain ways that even the gods can travel between these, the Bifrost being the most prevalent one. Now, some gods were gifted such sacred and divine items that did allow them to travel between the realms. Thor's chariot is a good example of this. Odin's 8-legged steed Sleipnir. Both of these can traverse between the realms without having to use the traditional method of the Bifrost, which is how normally everybody else has to get around the 9 realms. But these are qualities that are very, very specific to the elder gods. So that's cosmology. Now, the next key aspect is the ethics and the values of the faith. And heathenism and Norse paganism emphasizes very, very heavily on honor, loyalty, hospitality, courage, and respect. They also emphasize very, very heavily on self-reliance and industriousness of the individual. So there's a very widespread view as far as ethics go, but it's generally centered on truth, courage, and honor. Is usually the core of just about everything that you're going to find within the ethics aspect of the faith. And the last aspect is practice. And what this involves is our rituals, our holidays and festivals. And it is our belief in the relationship that we have between us individually and the gods, because that's something that's very, very specific to ours, is that in paganism, is that, you know, the relationship between us, the mortal, and the divine is a one-on-one relationship. It's between the God and the divine entity and the individual. There's no medium that you find in a lot of monotheistic religions today, where they believe the spiritual leader, priest, or so is the one that mediates for the people primarily on behalf for, towards the gods. We do not have that kind of relationship with our gods. So that's basically, in a nutshell, the individual overview and beginning and kind of a starting place for where we're going to be at as far as learning more about the faith. I hope you enjoyed this segment. Looking forward to the next one. And our next chapter is actually going to be on the creation story and the 9 realms. So thank you again for watching, and walk always with the gods.